she was born, like right when she came out, the doctor kind of like, puts her in front, and it's a girl, and tells Brian to cut the umbilical cord, and then all Brian saw was the top of her head. And so he just went in like sheer panic, and he was like frozen. And he's like, but her head, like what's wrong with her head? Like what's on her head?
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Moms on the Mic with Mariah. I am very excited for this episode today. I have been humbled to a whole nother degree after talking to Karen, a mother of 4. I really have a profound amount of respect for her, and I hope that you all take as much from the episode away that I did. Karen talks a lot about her issues with cholestasis and complications with her first daughter's birth, and her daughter being taken away to another hospital and having skull surgery. So for the mother out there who's maybe deciding to do a VBAC, or someone who's pregnant with twins, or someone who had complications with their labor, this episode probably is for you. I just want to remind you guys that, listen, we're not medical professionals. None of us are, unless they come on and have an MD behind their name, which I will warn you of that and tell you. But these are just normal people telling their stories. And so I just want to remind you guys that this is just their unique experience. Be gentle and understand that these are mothers who have stepped forward to tell their stories in hopes that someone else will advocate for themselves, or someone else will feel a little bit better. Thank you for listening. So today I'm really excited to have Karen on. We know each other from high school, so it's really, really exciting to have her on as Moms on the Mic. She's a mom of fucking 4 kids. I mean, it's insane. God bless you. You're amazing. I commend you. I mean, it's very admirable after going through what I did with 1 pregnancy. So welcome to Moms on the Mic, Karen.
Thanks for having me. This is so cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear your stories. I know we're going to talk a little bit about Eliana first and your pregnancy with her, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and how you and your husband Brian met?
Okay, so obviously my name's Karen Kruger. Brian and I met in Mr. Kelso's biology class, sophomore year of high school. So we were literally 14, turned 15 by this time we started dating, and it's just kind of been history ever since. So it's like we've been through a lot together. So it's definitely a fun journey to be on. And now we have 4 kids, which we still can't even believe. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And how long have you guys been married?
We've been married 8.5 years. So coming up on 9 in August.
How old are your kids, Karen?
So Eliana's 5. She'll be 6 in April. The twins, Damon and Carson, are 3. And then the new baby, Lucas, is 6 weeks.
Oh, he's so cute. Thanks so much for getting on. I can't believe you're like even alive. 6 weeks postpartum.
I'm half awake, but you can't see that. It's fine.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to like throw you way back into your first pregnancy. I'm sure you can remember, because all of us can like remember how we found out we were pregnant, but like what happened when you found out you were pregnant? Like, were you panicking? How did you feel? Like, what?
Oh my gosh. Thinking? No, honestly, I was so excited because I feel like all I wanted to do was like be a mom. So like I always wanted to get married young and have kids young. So like once we were married at 22, I was like, babies. But it took, we were working like really hard trying to, get our first place and do all that. And then by the time we got pregnant with her, I was 24, and we were just so excited. Like we were overjoyed, couldn't wait. The nausea set in, and then you're like, oh, this is real. Because I was like literally living at the toilet for like the first 16 weeks. So that was rough. But especially because I worked in cosmetics. So you walk by every fragrance and you're like, that makes you want to barf. That makes you want to barf. But
oh, whoa. I forget about this. So like how were you managing morning sickness and working at the time?
It was rough. There were so many times I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom because I just like couldn't hang with people's scents and things. And that's why I feel like I instantly just assumed I was having a girl, because I was so hypersensitive, which is what my mom's stories always used to be like. So I was like, oh, this is real. This is where it sets in. But I couldn't do my job properly as a manager because honestly, I was always sick or calling out or couldn't leave the bathroom. And it was unprofessional and terrible. But after like those first 16 weeks, I was able to power through it a little bit better.
So when did you decide that you were going to be a stay-at-home mom? Like, I know you always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but like
Yeah.
when did you decide like, okay, I'm going to stay at home with my kids?
I always assumed I was going to stay at home with the kids when I had more than one. But after Eliana was born, she needed surgery, and I just never went back to work. I wasn't going to go back until she was recovered. And then we found out we were moving to another state. So fortunately, it just worked out that we weren't going to be in California anymore. So I was able to stay home with her. And after all we had been through, it was what Brian and I felt like was best.
Yeah, I definitely can understand how it just gets to be like too much, right? If you're managing multiple things,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
health issues, right, after a pregnancy. So like you were super sick, you were throwing up. I mean,
Yeah.
so what were you doing to like combat that nausea?
Oh my gosh, I literally tried everything from like the lemon water to the ginger to the pregnancy drops to just every single product they had. I feel like I had tried it, but oh man, it was rough. Like my body, I feel like was depleted of so many nutrients just because I wasn't able to keep anything down. I was losing weight. I refused meat, protein, like everything was disgusting to me, so I just lived on fruit and salad, and that was about it.
Oh, I'm a vegetarian, so like I do hear people like saying meat's disgusting, and I'm like, well, I didn't
Yeah.
even know because I don't eat meat anymore. I haven't eaten meat for like 6 years now or five
Oh my
years. So
gosh, that's good for
yeah, but
you.
everybody pregnant has said like they didn't want to eat meat.
No, honestly, and I didn't have a problem with my other pregnancies, but with the first one, and I was like, I don't know if it was because it was a girl, like I could not stomach it. It was bad. The smell, the texture, the taste, like everything is so interesting.
Yeah, pregnancy is like those hormones are really, really weird. So Eliana, how did you, first of all, her name is really pretty. I've always really,
Thank
really
you.
liked it. So how did you guys figure out a name for Eliana?
Honestly, it took us a while to get pregnant, so I feel like by the time we did, we came across the name and we saw that it had meant God's gift. And I was like, we just felt like there was no other name that would fit her better once we found out it was a girl. So we were stuck with that from like the very beginning.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah, her
Yeah,
name is really, really pretty. What
thank
happened,
you.
Karen, with Eliana? Like, when did the problems really arise, and what happened? Like, I don't even understand how this even, like, did they find it on the
No.
ultrasound? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, so Eliana, when she was born, she had what's called cholestasis, which is when your bile from your liver completely stops or slows down production. And the bile in your liver is the digestive fluid, so it's helping your body digest and keep things moving. So I had that, and then I think I told you, I was literally telling the doctors, I'm so itchy, I'm so uncomfortable, like something's wrong. They're like, you're young, you're fine. And so after weeks of testing, I had to be induced, which is then how we found out after she was born that she had what's called an encephalocele, which is a rare birth defect of your neural tube, and it can infect your brain. So we didn't find out till after she was born, but like all this other stuff had to come to pass where I was constantly pushing my doctors that something wasn't right because my body wasn't functioning. Like I was severely itchy where I was scratching my hands till they were like bleeding. The palms of my hands were disgusting, so red. And Brian would have to grab me like cold water bottles just to sleep with them in my hands and on my feet. And so for like 2 weeks, I had to keep pushing the doctor like this isn't right. And then finally she tested me, even though she didn't want to. And she called me back like a couple days later saying, hey, so you need to come in and, have this baby. And I was like, great, like this weekend, next week. She's like, now, like your levels are really bad. She's like, right now, like drop everything and come in. So I was like, that whole process of the induction and getting them, they weren't really listening to me and what I was going through. So that was a really frustrating experience. And they never did my 36-week ultrasound because they were too busy. And that's how they would have been able to catch her skull defect, was that last ultrasound. So they were just very negligent in their care for me, in my opinion, because they just summed it up to, you're young, you're healthy, you're fine, like, don't worry about it. And so that was like extremely frustrating because they should have caught it on that 36-week ultrasound, because she should have never been a vaginal birth, because it was actually fatal and really dangerous that we went through with that delivery in the first place. So it was just insane.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know a lot about my pregnancy, but I had gone in at 3 months because I had developed severe depression, had dizziness, optic issues, and my
Yeah.
doctor said, "Well, just go to a psychiatrist, you're fine." And I was like, "No, like I'm telling you now, like this is beyond depression. Like I'm not a depressed person. I don't have vision problems normally. Like yes, I've had them in the past, but they blamed it on blood pressure." And so it's very interesting to hear you say, like, you basically have to be your own advocate because
Yeah.
providers only used to what they see. So, I mean, what advice would you give to someone like feeling some of these symptoms? I mean, first of all, you were itchy. So, what other things
Yeah.
really triggered you to say, like, I really need a blood test? And, like, how did you even know what to ask for?
It literally wasn't until like I was scratching my hands till they were bleeding, and like Brian and I were like, this is not normal. So we were looking it up, and everything kept coming back up as cholestasis. So I was convinced that that's what I had, and I just needed them to confirm it. But I felt like it was just really frustrating just to be like, you're young, you're fine. Like they're chumming it up to statistics and like, oh, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. So it was just extremely frustrating to me because it's like, well, I know something's wrong. Like I've never felt this before, and like I learned to find out later that that's actually really dangerous if it goes on. Like a lot of infants can die, like, and it's really dangerous for the woman's body too. So it's like I don't understand how they were just so uninterested for 2 weeks to test, and it took me being pushy, which was really hard for me. But I feel like that's my biggest piece of advice is like push when you know that something's not right, check it and check it again, because like they often will dismiss it or think it's fine or tell you come back next week if you're feeling like that, then we'll talk about it then. And it's like, why can't we just like do it now?
Yeah, and there's a lot of testing that isn't routine, like my prolactin. That is something that you have to ask for being tested. And really 10% of people have these brain tumors apparently. Like, so why aren't we testing this normally in pregnancy? So like,
Yeah.
how would someone, like, what is the test that they ask for? Like, can you remember what you asked for this condition?
Yeah, I had to ask them for a blood test specifically just so they could check the numbers of the bile in my bloodstream going to and from my liver. So it was blood work. So I literally had to push through for blood work.
And what effects can that have on you?
No, it was just the severe itching, but it can lead to liver failure and other things. So I just didn't understand why there wasn't more urgency to check on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah,
My
it
jaw
is
is
insane.
open with like the stuff, I hear. Like, in your situation's crazy to me. So
Yeah.
the ultrasound, like, how the hell do you get so busy that you can't do an ultrasound at 36 weeks? Like, what the fuck happened there?
Oh my gosh, we traded insurance providers because Brian got a new job. So we were actually transferred from Kaiser to Stanford. And one of the OBs went into preterm labor. So they were short staffed. And they just were like, oh, you don't need to do that ultrasound, like, oh, you're fine. So it was another like push off. You're young, you're fine. This is a healthy pregnancy. You're in perfect health. You're 25. You're not high risk. So it was just like another thing where I felt like I kind of just got pushed aside because they were looking at statistics because it should have actually been caught beforehand. And normally when they do those like in-depth anatomy screenings at 20 weeks, they can kind of see something, but the skull isn't done fusing, so they can't actually give you a good prediction at that ultrasound, which is why I would encourage the 36-week one. Make sure like everything's okay, because had I known what I knew, I wouldn't have gone through and put my child at risk with a vaginal delivery, even though I feel like that's an easier delivery for recovery for me. I wouldn't have put my child through that and the risk that came with.
Well, we as mothers sacrifice anything for our
Oh my
child,
gosh, yeah,
period. Like, we're not going to put
absolutely.
our child at harm. So, like, I get it. Like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
even thought about it. I'd be like, screw my abs.
Yeah, no, it's scary. It's scary because at that point, like all you're worried about is your child and that they're just born healthy. And it's just so crazy because it's like when you think of pregnancy, like back in the day when you're thinking about like, oh, people get pregnant and go to the hospital and have a baby and take their baby home. And I'm like, at that point, I didn't know what that was like. It was just so weird because nothing was how I assumed it was going to be. But I guess that's the problem with assumptions, right?
Yeah, I think it's a problem with society, Karen, personally, and I think that's why Moms on the Mic is going to exist for myself for for a very long time, because us telling our stories normalizes the fact that pregnancy isn't always easy. Like, it's a blessing to have your
Yeah.
baby come home, and it's a blessing to have a healthy child and a healthy mom. Like, people
Yeah.
don't deal always with this shit. Like, people are dealing with a ton of stuff to have these children.
Yeah, we take a lot of things for granted. So I feel like this is why it's so humbling and brings so much awareness, is because of what you have to go through to understand.
Oh, for sure. And you can't understand, I think, until you've gone through it, or, you know, people who go through IVF or things like that, where they're trying so hard to get their body in pristine condition to have children, or they go through
Yeah.
themselves going through issues, and then I think they start to realize, like, this is no joke.
Yeah, it's not. It's crazy.
So what happened when you went into labor? Like, what was labor like? What was going on that day or night?
So it was in the afternoon when they called me. So Julia, our good friend, was hanging out with me at home, and I got the call, and she just like, I had sheer panic because they're like, they said I need to come now. And so at that moment I started panicking because I was like, I knew something was wrong. And she's like, it's okay, take a shower, I'll get your bag, I'll put it in the car. So she drives me to the hospital. So calm, literally best person to have like in a crisis, because I literally bothered her so much. But we got to the hospital, and the induction process was they were putting a pill in my cervix to get me to dilate. So I was already at a centimeter. I was 38 weeks pregnant. And they said, we're going to give you this pill to soften and open your cervix every 4 hours for the next 24 hours to get you ready for labor. So they're like, you'll have this baby in 2 days. Because I got in on a Thursday, and they're like, you'll have the baby Saturday. So they put the pill in my cervix, and then they come back and check me. I went from 1 centimeter to 3. So they were like, oh, okay, so we're not going to do the pill. We'll see how your body dilates. And I got to like a centimeter, pretty much a centimeter an hour. I was so scared. I got the epidural at 5 centimeters because I was like, I don't want to go through this experience and then not have the option to do it, like, because I didn't know what to expect. So I got that. I think by the time I was 6 centimeters, I had the epidural. I was able to sleep. I was so relaxed. I was so comfortable, besides the fact that like labor is just nerve-wracking in general. The epidural helped me feel more relaxed. By the time it got to like 10:30 in the morning, I woke up. I was at 10 centimeters. You know, those big lights come down from the ceiling. Yeah, they're like, is it okay if a student comes in? I'm like, I don't even care. Like, I'm not paying attention to you. And then everything happened so fast from that point, because I was like, lights come down, doctor's right here. Like, and not one student came in, but there was like a class of like 10 of them.
What?
And I'm just like, just so overwhelmed. And then the doctor gave me a nice episiotomy all the way down, and I felt it. Oh my gosh. Like, it wasn't even my doctor. It was just like the other guy that they had on call. And he just like was like, oh, just like made a straight cut. I turned ghost. I turned like white and tensed up so much. Because they were like, stop hitting the button for your epidural so you could feel you're pushing. Like, don't hit the medicine. So for the last 30 minutes, I like didn't touch it. And so, I mean, obviously it helped me a little bit, but I was still able to feel so much pressure. And I felt him cut me, and I turned white. And Brian and my mom kind of just like, they were on both sides, and they just like looked at me like, okay, it's time.
I didn't even think they did that anymore.
I didn't either. And
they don't do that anymore.
I thought they didn't either, because I would have rather naturally torn, because that was one of the things that made my recovery like so hard. But I feel like after that was said and done and she came out, I forgot about it until like the next day, when you like feel it and you're like, oh. She was born like right when she came out. The doctor kind of like, you know, puts her in front, and it's a girl, and tells Brian to cut the umbilical cord. And then all Brian saw was the top of her head. And so he just went in like sheer panic, and he was like frozen. And he's like, but her head, like what's wrong with her head? Like, what's on her head? And the doctor's like, you still have to cut the cord. We can't look at her until you like cut the cord. So he cuts the cord, and like from that moment on, I feel like our worlds were just like shaken. She had a big bubble on the top of her head, and so it's called an encephalocele, and it's a rare birth defect of the neural tube that can affect the brain. So it's basically a skull defect where the bone didn't fuse. So babies have the soft spot, the fontanelle, like on the top of their head and the back of their head for like labor, but in the middle of their head, they have skull. So she didn't have skull in the middle or in her soft spots. So it was just all missing. And the doctors saw that, and of course, like, they're trying to remain calm, but then they're not saying things that are calming. And I was able to actually hold her and try to breastfeed her for a good like 30, 45 minutes. And then paramedics came in, put her in one of the incubators, and took her by ambulance to UCSF with Brian. So, and my mom, after she was born, left. So it was just like me in this hospital room, like no mom, no husband, no baby. And it was just like, that was like a dark moment for me, because I like literally could not stop crying, because we literally thought that we were going to lose this baby that we just brought into the world. So we were full of just like panic. And like I said, when things don't go as planned or don't go as expected, it was not what we were expecting. So it was just so crazy, because we didn't know what it was until like 2 or 3 days in. So it was just like lots of unknowns. So you're just like sitting on pins and needles for the first 48 hours as they're trying to run tests and figure out what's going on and figure out a solution.
What was the likelihood of Eliana surviving that vaginal labor, considering she had that? Like, now that you know what you know.
They didn't tell me what the survival rate would have been. They just said because it's a bubble of spinal fluid, and sometimes it contains brain tissue, but they said if that bubble of spinal fluid were to have ruptured, it would have been fatal. So that's why we were like, why did they have us do a vaginal birth? Like, that was not a risk that I would have taken. So it was just so scary. But obviously, like, I was just so thankful that that wasn't the plan that God had. And so it was honestly just terrifying, like so terrifying. The minute that my epidural wore off, I called my cousins who I knew were working nearby, and I had them drive me to San Francisco to be with Brian and Eliana. So the moment, like, I got the feeling back in my legs, I grabbed my crap, I checked myself out of there. I was like, I'm leaving. Like, I don't want to be here. I was like, I don't want to be here. Like, I need to be with my child. And so, like, checked myself out as soon as I could stand. My cousins drove me all the way to UCSF, and I literally just, like, we slept on recliners in the NICU for just, like, the first 4 days as they were just trying to figure out what was going on. And I, like, Brian and I cried, like, every single day. Just were wrecks. I think it took 2 or 3 days for them to finally tell us that the one good piece of news was that her encephalocele didn't contain brain tissue. So there was a really good chance that she wouldn't suffer cognitively. And we just knew at that point she was going to have an operation. So we had like a little bit of a solution, but we were just still like a mess.
It's really sad. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even know even how to process that, because it's one thing for stuff to happen to us, but our children, like,
Yeah.
nobody can understand this until they go through something like this, like yourself.
No, because and the doctors are just telling you, oh, like, when an encephalocele is on the back of a kid's head, the survival rate's like 55%, versus if it's on the front, it's 100, and hers was like right in the middle. So we're just like, obviously, like, your thoughts kind of run wild as they give you all your worst case scenarios. We decided that after talking to surgeons at UCSF Children's Hospital that we would go ahead and do the operation, but we waited till she was 3 months because they didn't feel comfortable and we didn't feel comfortable with her doing it as such a tiny newborn, because there are more risks. So they did want her to be a little bit bigger developmentally.
So, you know, the one blessing I will say is UCSF. I mean, that's where I'm going for my surgery. Like, the neurology program there is
So good.
absolutely amazing. I mean, it's like number one in the country. So
Right.
we're so blessed, right, to live by this hub.
Yeah.
So as you were doing your research, did you even have time to get other opinions, or you kind of just were like, okay, we're definitely going to go with UCSF. Like, they know what they're doing?
Honestly, we did a little bit of research, but we already knew that that was our best option. And then the doctor that we were talking to made us feel so comfortable because it wasn't the first time he'd done this surgery. He had confidence in it. Obviously, he has to share the risks, but he had confidence and he'd been through it before. He was at UCLA and UCSF, and he is one of the best. So we put our faith in God and in him and his ability, and we just knew that we had to correct it because it was actually more dangerous for her to constantly have that, because she would always be at risk. It was just honestly a huge test of our faith.
Yeah, for sure. What did that look like as far as you guys preparing for surgery for her? Because there was a lag, right, between surgery. So, like, what things did you have to do to protect her before surgery?
Before surgery, we were just really cautious of whoever was holding her and not to touch it. And it was crazy because every time she cried and got really upset, which obviously happens with babies, the fluid and the bubble would expand and become bigger. So we always tried to like quickly feed her or quickly soothe her, or we were always holding her to keep her calm, to keep less fluid like from filling, just to keep her calm and feed her and just keep her healthy as best we can. Constantly just being cautious of where and how we were holding her, not to irritate it for like the first 3 months.
What did that look like for surgery, Jay? What do they do? Is there preparation and things that you have to do, or you would tell parents out there to prepare their child for this outside of obviously being careful when people are holding her?
It was just a lot of emotional preparation, like knowing all the effects and knowing what recovery entails and knowing and your doctor. Like, I just feel like all of that is honestly the only thing that's going to help, because that day is just like a pit in your stomach kind of a day, because surgery is like more than 3 hours and you just have to just wait. I feel like it just came down to the doctor too, to be honest, like having confidence in him and his abilities and knowing that he knew what he was doing and he felt confident, because he was going to have to literally cut her skull on the bottom of her head and fuse it to the middle where there was no skull. Because the way he explained it was, the beautiful thing about kids is and babies is that where they don't have bone knows to regenerate. So the body does a pretty amazing thing. And so where there already was bone, it would regenerate, but we needed to protect her skull where her brain wasn't covered. Because let's say if she was a toddler and she fell or something happened, which those things do happen, we just needed to make sure she was protected. So to me, the surgery risk was smaller than the risk as she was going to grow.
So they'd bring her in for surgery that morning. I mean, I would have been losing my shit. So I
Oh,
get
yeah.
it.
We
Yeah.
were a nervous wreck. I remembered my mom was thinking just Brian and I were going to go. And I was like, what do you mean you're not coming? I need you. Such a mess. Such a mess. Like, I don't think we didn't want to eat. Like, we were just so nervous. And then Brian's mom was there too. And they were just trying to be like, eat something, relax. It's going to be okay. Like, waiting for updates. But the minute the doctor came out and goes, it went good, like, the sigh of relief and the weight that comes off of your chest is just like so amazing. But I still remember when they were bringing us back to the recovery NICU, like the ICU area where they were holding her, and we heard this baby crying. And I remember somebody saying, is that Eliana? And Brian and I were like, no, that's not her cry. Like, that wasn't her. And we got there and it was her. It was so insane, because it was like, your babies cry, but after a surgery that long, she was so groggy, so swollen. She didn't like look like herself or sound like herself. She had this huge scar all the way across the back of her head because they shaved it. And she was just so swollen. Like, it was rough. I feel like we always had to prop her up on her side, like roll, so she would have to sleep on one side and then the other. So you're constantly rotating to help with the swelling and to keep her off the incision and make sure it's not infected and stays clean. But man, I feel like it was a huge sigh of relief once that part was over.
And what did they tell you as far as her recovery? What would that look like? And how would you even, well, actually, let's just start with that. And then I'm going to ask you a question about her cognitive abilities,
Yeah.
what that may change. So what happened when you brought her home, and how would that look like as far as taking care of a baby like this?
It was constantly rotating her for the next like 2 months until her incision completely healed and, all the swelling was gone. Just propping her from side to side and constantly holding her carefully. We didn't always want lots of people holding her and touching her to like keep her risk of infection down and make sure she was getting healed. The wound was like bandaged and we would probably have to put like the cream. There were so many times where she would scream because she was in pain. And so it was just like the medication was helpful. Yeah, I feel like all of it now, like looking back, is just such a blur. But when your kid needs you, you just kind of go into like survival mode and you're like, hey, this is what they need. And you learn their new cries and what they mean. And you learn their new cues and what those mean. And like I said, she didn't have brain tissue in the encephalocele, because we had learned after the fact that encephaloceles are prevalent in people who have a family history of spina bifida and other things. And, we found out after the fact that there was some distant cousin on Brian's side that did have spina bifida, so it could have led to like why she had that defect. And we just had never known because it wasn't anybody in the immediate family. And like there wasn't, again, we didn't think there was a risk. Now knowing that, we know that it does increase the chances in other pregnancies. But to be honest, I don't feel like we worried so much about that. We were just more focused on each day and took it as it came.
Let's talk a little bit about decompressing as a mother. I mean, I feel like going through something on my side right now, like I don't really have time to decompress because I have a baby to take care of. And so what advice, I mean, I feel like you're the perfect person to ask this for myself and other mothers listening who are going through things themselves or with their children. What are ways to deal with this? Or do you just kind of push through and deal with the mental aspects after?
To be honest, I was pushing through and I did deal with the mental aspects after the fact. But I feel like just honestly through prayer, like I felt like it brought me really close to my relationship with God because I feel like I went through so many struggles and there was nothing that I can control when I was young and naive and I thought I was in control of things and when I could get pregnant and how I would bring my baby home and all these little things. You start to realize you're not in control. So my prayer time is how I actually started to grow my relationship with faith, but it's also my support system that I had with my mom and, my dad, my sisters, and Brian. Like, we really had to be each other's rock. So he knew when I was having a hard day, he knew he essentially would push his feelings aside to help me. And then vice versa. Like, when I saw that it emotionally was hitting him, I would try to take on that role. So I felt like we tried to take turns decompressing and supporting and doing things in that way. But I also feel like the support system just from family and friends and the encouragement and the help and just all the little things were also helpful when you're worried about taking care of a child. Like somebody bringing you a meal or saying,
it's the nicest thing in the world. Like, I never thought that stuff would be cool. Like someone dropping off food and you're like, thank God for these people.
Yeah. Like literally just a meal, or like there were so many times where my mom or Julia or somebody would come over and be like, I'll watch her. She's napping. Take a shower. Just honestly, the little things that, because we just never wanted to leave her side. Having that community and that support in that way, I felt like was really helpful because emotionally, even though you don't ever want to leave, you need to take 5 minutes to yourself, or an hour to yourself, go to the grocery store, literally relax for just 2 seconds and stop being so anxious and worried.
Yeah, I mean, this is mind-boggling how we have to just get through things as mothers. I mean, what was Eliana's prognosis with her cognitive function? Were they just kind of waiting for her to speak till they knew, or what? How did this work?
Yeah, so with her pediatrician, I felt like we had way more follow-ups than normal. And even after surgery, there were a lot of post-op appointments. They wanted to make sure, that babies at a certain point need to be tracking from side to side by following an object, or just little things, or if she was seeing color, if she would gravitate towards certain things. So there was a few appointments that she had like that. And the doctor was completely confident that she was fine, and that he was obviously very cautious not to obviously get to her brain when he was soldering and reattaching her skull. So he was confident that she wouldn't have issues. But even as she would get to her milestones, 1.5, 2, her pediatricians were really good about making sure that she was still on track cognitively. And thank God she was. She actually was really smart and she was thriving. I feel like once we got past the point where she was healed, she's just been she was always the happiest, cutest baby.
Sweet girl.
I know.
Yeah, that's a lot to go through. And what happened with the liver issues that you were having? Did that end up subsiding from your delivery, or what?
Yeah, right after delivery, it completely subsided. So it was due to pregnancy, and I could have had it again in all other pregnancies, which obviously I was very aware to let them know. And thankfully, I actually didn't experience it in my other 2 pregnancies. So that's the crazy thing. But yeah, even till this day, she's still cognitively on track. She does amazing in school. She's really smart. Her skull didn't fuse together all the way, but it is mostly covered. She has a couple thin lines where it didn't completely close. But the way that the doctor explained it was, it's obviously as good as it's going to get, and it should always protect her. He's like, the likelihood that something really, really sharp would puncture this really, really small area is like so small. So he just, was just telling us, like, don't worry. She's going to grow to be a normal kid. She can resume normal activities. Because, we were worried that she wasn't going to be able to do certain sports. So now we're able to start her in those things. So it's beautiful because, like, these dreams that you had for her when she was a baby and you were so terrified, she's actually like come full circle and she's like living through them now. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful moment to be grateful when I get to reflect on those things.
You've been through a lot with your first baby. I mean, it's a lot, Karen.
Crazy.
I think back to I was at the club acting a fool, and like you're dealing with all this stuff. And as a mother, like I look now and I'm like, God, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you because, and I've told you that before, because I think what you look back on is you say, wow, like people are dealing with so many things, and it's only till you can get to that place yourself in life, I think, that you look back and say, wow, like what a humbling experience it's been for me to see a mother like you going through that so young, because we were young doing that.
No, I know.
Everything.
Yeah.
You made a good point. Like we think we know everything, but we don't. Like you get humbled.
It's crazy. No, I was just going to say thank you, but I was like, it was crazy because until your child is born, I feel like we all have really selfish tendencies, and you don't flip that switch until that change kind of happens, and it's actually like a beautiful thing, but it is humbling. And, I'm just like thankful. I was like, that we're able to discuss this now. I think it's such a beautiful full circle moment.
It is a full circle moment for us. It really
is. It's awesome.
So what I like to finish, this segment for us, like with the same question is, what well wishes would you send to someone dealing, number one, with the liver issue? I forget the name of it, but that, and then secondary, like someone who's dealing with this, what is it? Encephalocele.
It's an encephalocele. Yeah.
Yeah, someone dealing with that with their young baby.
Yeah, for cholestasis, like obviously the longer it goes on, the worse your symptoms are going to get, the worse your risks are going to get. So just obviously I would just say like be your advocate and really push and be like, this isn't right, like right away, right off the bat, because I feel like I tend to kind of sit back and I wasn't as pushy as I feel like I should have been initially until it got really bad. So I would just say to be your advocate for your own body, because nobody's going to know it better than you. And for when somebody's child has an encephalocele and all that they have to endure with even just any surgery that your child goes through, just I feel like it's very emotionally taxing, and just to make sure you have a support system, like whether it's mom, a friend, your spouse, like whoever it is. And the bigger your support system, the better, because everybody will offer you different things that are helpful and different pieces of advice that make you feel calm in that moment, because everybody thinks differently and has a different perspective on things. So just surround yourself with good community. And mine was like my faith, because when nobody else could help me, like God was the only one that did. So he got me through it all, and we're on the other side of it.
Yeah. Well, God bless you. I mean, that's like, it's a really big thing to swallow. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Moms on the Mic with Mariah. We will see you all back here again next Monday. Go ahead and follow us on Spotify, Apple, and any major podcast platforms. On Apple Podcasts, rate and review us. Follow us on IG, YouTube, and TikTok at Moms on the Mic with Mariah, and let me know what issues you guys would like to hear on the podcast and any feedback. And also, if you'd like to come on and tell your story, go ahead and throw me a DM. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next Monday. Another story from another lovely person. See ya.